Hello and welcome to The Positive Shift, a podcast hosted by Simcoe Addiction and Mental Health, where we focus on shifting perspectives on the journey of mental health and addiction recovery. Our goal is to create a safe and supportive space for those who are struggling and to provide guidance, hope, and encouragement. We understand that the road to recovery and self-improvement can be a challenging one. However, it's not something you have to do alone. Whether you are someone who is dealing with mental health and/or addiction, we believe that every story has value and can help others feel seen and heard. Our goal with this podcast is to bring together experts and real-life experiences to provide practical and meaningful insights into the process of healing. We want you to know that you are not defined by your struggles and that there is always a way to move forward. We are here to listen, to support, and to offer a shoulder to lean on as you take the important steps towards a better, more fulfilling life. So let's get started and take this journey together. Before we begin, the content discussed in this episode could be sensitive to our listeners. If you are currently in crisis, please contact Canada's Suicide Prevention Service at 1-833-456-4566 or dial 911. If you are in need of more information, please head over to our website, simcoerehab.ca, and go to our Resources tab to access downloadable PDFs, contacts, and guides. If you're looking for support and wish to seek treatment, you can email us at info@simcoerehab.ca or call today at 1-833-304-8181.
How you doing, Chrissy?
I'm good, Jay. How about you?
Good. My name's Jay, and welcome to A Positive Shift. You know, I got to tell you, before I introduce myself, I got to tell you, I'm really, really hungry today.
Oh, I'm starving.
Like, I've been talking about a sandwich for like all morning.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I know. I
think
can't wait.
I love that did you get the email that they're going to have a little green room and they're going to stock us up with donuts and muffins and sandwiches and juices and stuff?
No, I didn't, but I can't wait for that.
Oh, you didn't get that email?
No, I did not. It was not included.
Neither did I. Hey, my name is Jay. As I said, I'm the manager of community partnerships at Simcoe Addiction Mental Health here in Innisfil, Ontario.
And I'm Chrissy. I'm the program manager at SAMH. And Jay and I work together hand in hand. And
we call it work.
Yeah, it's work pretty much.
My father always said, if you love your job, you never work a day in your life,
There you go.
And I love my job, It's good. So what are we talking about today, Chrissy? What exciting stuff are we bringing to the table?
So a quick, brief summary of what we're going to kind of talk about today is basically grief and depression. So understanding grief, understanding depression. We're going to share some personal stories, maybe not go into too much into depth, but some coping strategies that we've both used.
Cool.
And
cool.
Any extra information that we can provide you all with.
I love it.
And we'll dive deep into that and move up from there.
So playful and cheerful.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm just kidding. No, this is great. These are very incredibly important topics, right?
Yeah.
And that was what we wanted to do when we started this podcast was have the important and sometimes difficult conversations that we need to have, right?
Most definitely.
Hopefully we can perhaps if we don't help someone else out there today, maybe we'll be able to help each other, right?
Definitely.
I love it. Okay.
I agree.
Cool.
I agree.
Well, where do you want to kick this bad boy off?
So I guess we'll start off with what is grief?
Just, why not?
I feel like people don't necessarily think about what grief is, what it looks like, what it comes with.
Right.
So I don't know, just to start, grief is a natural response to loss,
sure.
Right? So for example, losing a loved one. This could be loss through, death or even just losing a friend.
Sure.
Right? So suffering from losing a friendship after an argument. So I think what's always mistaken is that grief is always associated with death.
Right.
And it's not necessarily the case.
No.
Right?
I grieved the loss of my DOC, right? For a long time.
Yeah. There you go. So, you feel the loss in different ways. Grief is a tough topic. It's a delicate topic. And it's
so personal. It's so intimate.
Exactly. Right. Right. When you say I'm grieving, people automatically know what you're going through.
I'm so sorry for your loss.
Right. Exactly. Right. So, and that sentence, first of all, drives me absolutely nuts.
Right. Right. I get you.
Yeah.
We've had this conversation.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And when you're grieving, I mean, one of the worst questions, especially when you're going through something, and it's a great question, but it's also the worst. How are you doing?
Oh my gosh. Right.
Yeah.
How do you think I'm doing?
It's tough.
You know, that's part of the process that we're going to discuss, right? The anger.
Definitely.
The anger doesn't necessarily have to be associated with the loss or the feeling of loss itself. It could actually be with the response of societal factors that are being put upon me, where I'm like, now I'm angry at you.
Yeah.
Now I'm angry at that.
Yeah.
And things that are secondary, thirdly.
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. It's definitely a sensitive topic, and there's just so many aspects to grief that people don't really understand. Like, yes, okay, it's an easy word to understand, but what comes with it is super complicated. Right? So, I mean, moving forward, talking about depression, because I feel like both go hand in hand. They can be similar, but there are huge differences.
Of course.
Right? So
of course.
Depression is a mood disorder. So it looks and feels like basically persistent sadness, having a lack of interest or pleasure in activities or things that you used to enjoy. You can have a change in appetite, so your appetite can really decrease. Interrupted sleep, so you can suffer from insomnia, let's say, because I know I do, especially when I'm down in the dumps. I cannot sleep,
right? Or
I'll want to sleep and I'll sleep too much. So it can be either or, and you just don't know what's going to hit you the night of. Low focus, poor concentration, fatigue, all of the above, really. I mean, depression is tough to handle, and it's tough to treat, and it's tough to get through, right? So I don't know if you've had any experiences with depression, but
I mean, obviously, although it's tough, it's very attainable, with the proper resources, with the proper treatment plan. But for me personally, I had a real difficult time with substituting the feelings that were associated with depression versus the feelings that I was feeling when I was in the process of grieving the loss, in this particular case, of a loved one. I had a really difficult time because a lot of the symptoms of depression really mirror the symptoms of post-acute withdrawal. And I was literally like coming off of, 22 years active addiction when I was dealing with my first real sense of loss, the grief. And although it wasn't even at that particular time someone that was incredibly close to me, it was a sense of having new feelings that I wasn't familiar with having. And so I would associate it with depression. So much like you mentioned, the second part about the sleeping, I wasn't so much laying up with insomnia, but I had no desire to get out of bed.
Yeah.
I had no desire to answer a cell phone. I had no desire to talk to people. And then I would slip into this, the poor me's, like I felt very, very, I felt very victimized.
Oh yeah.
Just going through the process and not actually assigning any feelings to what I was feeling at the time. And then I was lashing out. Does that make any sense? No,
it does. And along with feeling victimized to depression, you also feel worthless at the same time. And I totally understand the getting out of bed and not wanting to get out of bed. That is probably the most difficult part because, as I brought up before, I suffer from insomnia sometimes, but I also am so exhausted that I end up falling asleep. Suffering from insomnia, it's like the thoughts just drive you nuts and you just keep thinking like how worthless you are or how what happened to you is your fault and you're feeling guilty about it. So I don't know. There's a lot to bring up, and obviously I'm scrambling a little bit right now, but because it's a sensitive topic to me, and that's okay.
I think for many of us, right? I would think most. I would I mean, it's obviously a huge assumption, but I think it's a fair assumption to assume that most people listening to this show today have dealt with the loss of a family member or grief in some other platform that can identify with what you just said. Yeah,
it's tough. It's tough. And even sitting here talking about it, you know, actually coming here and talking about it, I'm having a very rough day today. This weekend was not good.
You're visibly moved by this topic, clearly.
And just actually talking about it and getting it out there is so rewarding, but I'm also absolutely terrified to even talk about it because it is terrifying and it's reality and it's what happens. And sometimes it's the unknown and you don't know what's going to happen and you don't understand your emotions, and it's hard to understand your emotions.
It's interesting, Chrissy. It's interesting that you mentioned that the way you mentioned it. Because when we were looking at the different stages of grief, the very first one is denial, right? And a lot of people know the acronym. And if you haven't, to our listeners, the acronym for denial is don't even know I am lying, right? And so it's wild when I sit there and listen right now, because I also, of course, I'm really affected, and like we said, most of our listeners, but it's like, even in this moment with me and you sitting here and we're going to tackle such an important topic, there's a resistance, right? There's a resistance to like almost where I have to acknowledge that I'm feeling the feelings associated with grief while I'm discussing grief. And I mean, isn't that one of the biggest hurdles that most people are facing anyways?
Definitely.
Like, I'm pushing back. I don't want to feel this, so I'm pushing back against it. And sometimes talking about it now, I can work my way around it instead of going right through it. Isn't that fair? Wow.
Yeah. And you know, when we do dive deep into the and when we do dive into the 5 stages of grief, we'll definitely identify each one, talk about it, define it, and bring up how it may look. So that way it brings awareness to people in the community out there who, may be suffering from grief and going through those 5 stages. So that way, if, you were to see someone going through the denial stage or, bargaining stage, you'll be able to define it and help them out.
I'm always in the bargaining stage. I'm in the bargaining stage right now.
There you go. So, I mean, before we move on to that, we will talk about the differences between grief and depression. And I think that is a very important topic because it gets people thinking. I mean, I've always associated my depression and my past depression with my grief. So to kind of identify them in separate ways, if that makes sense, is, I think, crucial. So getting onto that, let's just bring up one sentence about grief. So there's an identifiable loss.
Right.
Versus depression. A specific loss may or may not be identified.
Right.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, because I'm, again, right back to what we said at the very beginning, right? Like we know tangibly what grief generally means to us, and it's somebody that's in our life is now no longer in our life, and that's so again, that's the identifiable, clearly identifiable, and then continually being identified in the many years to come in so many different variations and reminders and circumstances that I'm put into, or I'm reminded that that person is no longer in my life, or that substance, or that or however that is framed. But with depression, a lot of times it for sure, it can be onset as typically around the same time as I'm going through these feelings. But as I go through the grief process, the grieving process moves forward, but the depression stays. And so how do I dictate the difference? I don't know if there's a way that I could, without somebody outside of myself pointing it out to me, because I really can't fix my thinking with my thinking. Yeah. And if I want to, and I'm not really sure what I'm feeling because I'm grieving, what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? So it's like a huge catch-22 that's going on inside my own brain.
Definitely.
It's like, I need someone else to come and go in there with me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, definitely.
It's a dark, dangerous neighborhood.
Yeah. And even for me, like, when grief pops up in my head, my loss always pops up. whoever I've lost in my life. So I know that when I'm suffering from grief, I know exactly where it's coming from. But when I'm suffering from depression, or I'm feeling those moods and those symptoms of depression, am I able to identify, okay, what's triggering me right now? Why am I feeling like this? Sometimes I'm not able to get to that root, and it's very frustrating. So, sometimes I'll sit there and I'll be feeling sad, and for the entire day, I won't know what's going on. Then I'll see the date, and it's a significant date. So say, for example, I lost someone on, I don't know, March 26th. And it's March 26th that day.
Right.
And I'm feeling moods that aren't really explainable, and I just don't know where it's coming from.
Yeah, all this disconnect pieces.
Exactly. And then I see the date, and then I'm like, wow, subconsciously, I know it. Today's the day.
Right.
And then I start feeling guilty that I forgot about it. So it just makes me feel so much worse. Right? So
yeah, because now I've also given it power. Right. So now I know the date is, so it explains away my feelings, and now I can justify the feelings, and really it allows me to sit with it even longer, even if I don't want to. Yeah.
So it may not be because of a loss. It may be a significant date that you have in mind, or maybe something happened, at work or wherever you were, and an argument, happened, and it took you back 5 years, and you don't realize it until the end of the day, or you don't realize it until a week after. It takes a while sometimes, but patience is key, and fighting through it is what we all need to focus on.
I think it's also important that when you mention that we also recognize that there are things that happen in our days too, like the arguments and these types of things, and they aren't associated with my grieving or my depression. They quite frankly could just be a disappointing moment in it throughout a day.
Oh, definitely.
Where something didn't go my way. I remember to ask myself, did I have a bad 5 minutes, or did I have a bad day, or did I have a bad 5 minutes that I milked all day? Like, consciously, I could be doing that because I'm so consistently brought back to that place of grieving and depression, where when something bad happens, I automatically tell myself that, oh, here we go again. I have that automatic response, and now I'm depressed and laying in bed for 2 hours. And meanwhile, all that really happened was I got in a fight with a meathead named Bob because he didn't give me my tool on time, right? Like, it's something silly.
Yeah.
Then there is a big difference.
Yeah, definitely. And, moving on to that, and I found this one really, really interesting.
If your name is Bob and you didn't give me back your tool, I really don't think you're a meathead.
There you go. But let's talk about, so going back to grief, thoughts of death are typically related to wanting to be reunited with the deceased loved one, versus depression, thoughts of death being related to feeling worthless, undeserving of life, or just being unable to cope with the amount of pain that you're in. So let's talk a little bit about those differences.
Okay.
So with grief, thoughts of death come from thinking of your loved one who passed away.
You see, it's difficult. I mean, yes, that's absolutely accurate, and I can see how that would be presented. But I think that all depends on if you're naturally. So if I'm going through the natural grieving process, and this is hypothetical. Let's say I've separated it already from feelings of depression. Let's say that, and all of a sudden, I'm not actively feeling what I'm feeling. So I'm going through those stages of grief. I'm in the denial stage. I get angry. And now all of a sudden, I start to think, well, you know what? I'll see that person again. Do I let my thinking, because I know for a fact that, Chrissy, that I can't control my first thought. I know that. I'm armed with this information. That's good news for me. I can't control my first thought. Most importantly, I can control my second one, and then my reaction to that second thought. So if that's the case, and I start to feel like almost to the point where I'm so low that I could consider removing myself from this world to join my loved one in the next, however that world looks, I think, and I like to hope that for me individually, and maybe for some of our listeners, that we would recognize that as a surefire sign that I need to probably get some help. or at least at the very least, talk to someone close to me really quickly.
Yeah.
So that I don't let these feelings sit inside and have that domino thinking effect.
Yeah, because that can happen. And personally, you know, talking about experience and stuff, thoughts of death, you know, relating it to wanting to be reunited with someone, it's happened to me. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, thinking about those important people in my life who I've lost, and keep in mind, for me, it all happened in 1 year. And we'll get to the personal experiences. I know I keep bringing it up, but it's because it's just inside right now. And I feel like, talking about it. And so
I'm feeling this energy. Chrissy, let us hear it.
Yeah.
Let the listeners hear it.
Yeah. Like, I mean, 2012 was a really bad year for me.
Okay.
Horrible year. I lost 3 significant people in my life. My brother and my 2 grandparents. Very tough. Like, my grandparents lived with me as well. So every morning we'd be downstairs with them. It was fantastic. They were just the best. And my brother and I were really close. And the reason why I say were is because he's passed away, obviously. So, yeah. And when he did pass away, I'd have dreams of him and I'd connect that way. And I'd always take signs like seeing a monarch butterfly as him, or, and it's hard talking about this and not getting emotional about it.
Okay,
like it just, sometimes tears happen. Yeah. It's fine. And I need to take my own advice, obviously. But, talking about the thoughts of death and relating it to wanting to reunite with a loved one. Yeah, I went through that. I did. And I can, but right away I did tell my family, I told my support system that I needed help because thinking these negative thoughts were not good. At the same time, I wasn't feeling understood at school. It was just a really, really tough time. So, but I am super thankful that I had my parents that I could rely on. I had my cousins that I could rely on, and it was just tough, but I got through it. And obviously those thoughts still sometimes come into my mind, but I don't let it take over. Mm-hmm. I'm living a great life here. I'm accepting the fact that I'm here physically and my brother isn't, but I will do things to honor him and I will do things to better myself at the end of the day.
I love it.
So.
Excellent. Thank you, first of all, for being so vulnerable here.
Yeah, it was tough.
Yeah, I could see that. I was feeling it. Yeah. But it's so important, right? It's such an important truth about any one of us, anyone that's listening today. It's so important to heal. We have to be able to move forward, right? Me personally, I have a different, I feel like with me, I'd grieved my mother 20 years before she was gone. And the reason I say that is because I was living in this place of active addiction and I'd pushed back all these people in my life. And I got to a point where I really didn't have, other than mom, was this connection. And I just want to say, like, I found that gratitude saved my life in early stages of grieving the loss of my mom. Let me explain. So my mom was, she was awesome, and so she had passed away, and I had been earlier on, about 6 months earlier, I was an angry guy. Mm-hmm. Long before she passed, and so I had a guy that challenged me to something. He challenged me to write a gratitude list every single day. So and this isn't a podcast on gratitude. I know we'll do one day, but I do want to share that every day he asked me to send him a letter, a message that provided him with 5 things that I was grateful for each morning, right? There's no problem. But he said, you can never repeat the same things twice. So I did this every day, and it was easy for the first few days. I'm grateful for sobriety. I'm grateful for the sun. I'm grateful for, ice hockey in Canada. Like, I was just grasping, right? And but by day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7, I couldn't really come up with anything that I was grateful for. Like, I knew consciously what I was grateful for, but I was like really, really trying hard to think about what it was, you know. And as I went through this process, it was about 25 days in. I was coming out of my bedroom one morning. I was freezing cold. I was shivering. And I remember thinking, God, I'm so cold. And then I went into the hallway and I stepped on Noah's Lego, my son Noah's Lego, and I kicked the Lego across the hallway. And I, you know, used a few choice words. And I go into the kitchen and I'm going to go make a coffee. And I realize that there's no coffee in the sugar bowl. So I'm like, the world's out to conspire against Jay. You know, here we go again. Everyone's out to get me. And all of a sudden I reach up to grab the sugar bag, stick it down on the counter, and the sugar goes everywhere. And I don't know about you, Chrissy, but like cleaning up sugar, spilled sugar is like the worst thing ever. And now I swear again, I walk to the front door. I open up the front door and there's like 3 feet of snow. And I screamed to the high heavens. I'm like, why me? And what was funny, organically, effortlessly, like this, you know, my mind went, wait a minute, Jay. You know, you're cold, but you can put a sweater on, you know, you stepped on your son's Lego, because you have a happy child playing Lego in your home today. You know, you spilled the sugar because you're making coffee because you have a reason to be up. You have purpose in your life today. Yeah. You know, you got to shovel the driveway. Well, Jay, you're able-bodied, buddy. Not everyone's story is that. Yeah. You know, you have a driveway today. And so what I learned about that practice was that, you know, I had this immediately shift in my mind where it went poor me to like, wow, am I ever grateful? Am I ever blessed? And it went from what I learned in that practice was it had nothing to do with what I was grateful for. It had to do with the practice of seeking gratitude in my life that allows me when things happen in my life, like the loss of my mother. And that's, of course, the far extreme. But like it allows me to come to a place in my mind where it automatically searches for the good. And so when my mom passed, you know, she was 84 years old. She passed of a cardiac arrest. I remember thinking, because of this gratitude practice, that immediately I said, well, at least she wasn't in pain. I mean, it could have been a whole lot worse. And then I remember thinking, she just did the World War II tour across Paris with my dad, healthy. That was on her bucket list. Yeah. She always wanted to go to Paris. And she did it. And then I started thinking, you know, my dad had prostate cancer, but he was doing good. My sister had a thing at work that excelled her into the next level. Yeah. My son was doing really well. My children were back in my life. And guess what? I was sober. And I was her long-term project. So my brain actually went like this, Chrissy. It said, I can't think of one regret my mother would have when she left this earth. Yeah. I mean, she even went so far as to say before she passed that she wanted to go before my dad. Yeah. And so I'm thinking in my head, if this was any other point of time in my life, there's no way I would have, like, so in other words, what I'm saying is the day after my mom passed, I actually began healing. Yeah. And my sister, and who's probably going to listen to this, she had a lot harder time with that because she wasn't practicing these things in her life. So she was stuck in that hole for a long time. Yeah. You know? That hole sucks. Yeah, that hole sucks. So, I mean, no, seriously. You know, for lack of clinical term, it sucks. It really does. But there is a way out, right? Yeah. And there is these things that we can do to start, like, A, to live our life so we're prepared when these things happen. And then B, you know, what do we do once it's happened? Yeah. Yeah. And you know, talking about, because I know I brought up thoughts of death related to, you know, feeling worthless, and undeserving of life and being unable to cope with the pain. Mm-hmm. Have you had to deal with that? I mean, I know that's a really personal question, but, you know I have. With what specifically? With dealing with depression and not having thoughts of death regarding your grief. I did have an experience where I mailed it in, and some of our listeners may know, some of them may not. But yeah, I did. I because to me that place, when I got to that place in my existence, because I will not say life, because I was certainly not living, I was just existing. I was really, really, I felt like there was absolutely no other way no other turn. I had nothing left. Yeah. And so, it was a complete, destruction and defeatist feeling. And I think that is another topic that we can discuss another day. Just because, I do have a lot to say on that as well. I
have not shared that with many people, only my family. So it would be a tough topic to talk about, but it's a topic that I think we can discuss probably another time. But
yeah, one that we discuss on a full stomach.
Definitely. Yeah, because it's hard. These topics are hard. They're triggering for listeners, but they're also triggering for us, right? So we're trying to be authentic as possible, but it's tough doing that. And we're doing this for you, and we're doing this to provide you with that support and to say that everything will be okay. Things may not feel like it now, but everything will be okay as long as you put that effort in.
It's the old adage, right? That you can't see the sunlight through the mud, but the sunlight sure as hell there.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I know we kind of got stuck on that one little sentence, but I think that was really important to talk about.
Agreed.
So, I mean, we can talk about the similarities between grief and depression, but I feel like a lot of people out there know.
I think we should circle back and just have another conversation another day about the same stuff.
Definitely.
I mean, there's a lot more to unpack, right? And and obviously it's a lot of heavy topic for one day. So why don't we start wrapping it up today, and and we can go have a sandwich.
Okay, that sounds good. Let's do that. I mean, we do probably need a part 2 for this one because it's a very intense topic.
I think so. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, thanks everyone for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you everybody for listening.
Yeah.
I've been cracking jokes about sandwiches all day, so there's a little bit more of an inside joke going on here.
It's true.
It's always like it's such a pleasure to be able to come into a forum and be able to discuss these most important discussions and have them with you, and be able to hopefully connect with at least one person today.
Definitely. So thanks for listening to this episode on The Positive Shift, where we talked about grief, depression, the differences and similarities between them, but we didn't really get to that, but that's okay. Moving forward, there will be a lot more to discuss, and we'll get to that. So see y'all next time, and I hope you guys enjoyed this very sensitive topic.
See you guys next time.